As you listen, keep in mind that though this podcast features medical and other professionals and regularly speaks on the topic of psychoactive substances in a positive light, nothing heard here should ever be taken as medical advice or as encouragement to consume any of the substances mentioned, especially the ones that are blatantly illegal in your country of residence. Listen critically and always check in with yourself before acting based on anything you hear or read on the internet. Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of ATTMind Radio. I'm your host as usual and as always, James W. Gesso, and I'm happy to be interviewing Oliver Quntanilla today. But before we get into the interview, I would like to express a gratitude for everyone who's been listening to the podcast and subscribing and giving me feedback. It really helps reaffirm what it is that I'm doing with this podcast and to reaffirm my continued investment into producing it for you guys. Also, as I've been mentioning in the other podcast, what is helping to support this coming out and me continuing to invest a lot of my time and energies into producing this for all of us is the ongoing support of people in regards to financial pledges in my Patreon page. So as mentioned previously, Patreon is like a crowdfunding platform to help me continue to invest in the upgrading of the podcast, as well as to help mitigate the financial costs of being alive and putting time towards things like this. So if you are really appreciating the podcast and you'd like to support it more directly, please head over to jameswgesso.com/Patreon and consider making a reasonable pledge that comes out once per month towards the production of the podcast and some of the other things that I've been working on. So that being said, I would like to welcome Oliver Quntanilla to the podcast. He is a director, producer, editor, and specifically he's the director of a documentary called Little Saints, which we're going to be talking about today. Now, he is also the director of Oaxaca, Day of the Dead. Did I pronounce that right, Oliver?
Yes.
Yeah. Oaxaca, Day of the Dead, a collection of 8 short films that showcase the Mexican holiday in the southern state of Oaxaca. That particular documentary screened at the National Geographic Society, Dallas Museum of Art, MOCA Jacksonville, Mexican American Cultural Center, Firehouse Arts Center, South Florida Day of the Dead Celebration, LA Day of the Dead, and the Oaxaca Film Festival. But the film we have him on the show to talk about today is Little Saints, a documentary about shamanism and the use of psilocybin mushrooms for physical, psychological healing and spiritual advancement in Mexico. He and his team were actually awarded a grant for this film from All Roads Film Project from National Geographic, and has since completion been exhibited at the Thin Line Film Festival, the Telluride Mushroom Festival, Mushroom City Fest, and several independent screenings in the San Francisco Bay Area and Los Angeles. Welcome to the show, Oliver.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Mm-hmm. I appreciate that this has kind of been a long time running that we've been working towards getting together for this podcast, and I recently watched Little Saints and I really enjoyed it. I see that for those of us who are on the YouTube, you're wearing a Little Saints t-shirt right now.
Yeah.
Maybe show that up a little bit. Yeah. And I actually heard about the documentary some time ago. There was a really great trailer. Of course, I'm tapped into the vein of whatever's happening in the mushroom world, especially documentaries about like little known side of the mushroom world, which is what does this tradition look like right now in Mexico? Like a lot of us are aware that that sort of the cultural launch into mushrooms in the Western world was from research, possibly from research from R. Gordon Wasson and his experiences down in Mexico with Marina Sabina, and but I think that there's a maybe sort of like a closed eye or an ambiguity about what that actually looks like in Mexico right now. That it's still happening, it's still there, and people are still doing this. So your documentary was a really vulnerable and seemingly authentic look at what it was like for this group of people to go in and have that experience, and what these mushrooms are, kind of the role they're playing culturally out there still in regards to being used as a spiritual medicine. What I'm curious about to start off the podcast is how you yourself came to be exposed to psilocybin mushrooms as a spiritual tool. What was the culture like for you as a young person, and in regards to mushrooms? And how did you go from this young person in that cultural atmosphere to investing yourself into what you present in the documentary as your personal relationship to this practice and to the curandera, is that an appropriate word, curandera?
Yes.
That you feature in this documentary, and even to making the documentary itself. Like, where did you start? What was it like? And how did you get to where you are now?
Okay. I tried mushrooms for the first time in 1999. It was not a party scene, but it was also not particularly spiritual. I went for a hike with some friends, and on that hike, we ran into some unknown people that we just find there, and they were about to take mushrooms, and they offered mushrooms to us. So we decided to take them. I didn't know what to expect. I've never done it. I've never done any other hallucinogenic drug, and the experience that night was very intense, and it was very humbling in a way. At the time, I would consider myself an atheist, even though I was raised Catholic and I went to Catholic elementary and middle school. When my father passed, I was 17 years old, and I will just think, it's like, what kind of God takes your father away in such a unexpected way? So I was at the time already questioning a lot of the things in religion and Catholicism to my teachers. And at that point, when my father passed, I decided to leave that behind. In this first journey that I had an experience that it was kind of funny, kind of silly at the same time. But I think what was shown on that particular vision, it was exactly what I needed to see in order to understand the spirituality in these substances. I still work on advertisement quite a lot. So my vision, that first vision was, first I was looking at the sun. It was the sunset. The flames of the sun covered the whole sky. I was hearing the sun burn. And I was thinking, this is really impressive. I'm like really close to the sun. Obviously, I'm not getting burnt, but I've never seen the sun in such majesty, And all of a sudden, the sun died. It was a black ball of ash in the sky. And in the vision, somehow I went to the other side of the sun, and the hand of God came into the frame, into the picture, and opened a little door behind the sun. And there was a battery inside. There was an Energizer battery, and took it out and put a new battery, a Duracell battery. And then the sun came back to life. But in the meantime, while the sun was a ball of ash in the sky, I was living in Los Angeles at the time, and a bunch of images of like icing, snowing. I'm sorry. I think my cell phone went off. So I was looking at hold on. My screen just got messed up. Now I cannot see you. Okay, so I went to a bunch of images came into my head as far like people going crazy, not understanding why it was getting so cold, everybody trying to run inside, get away of the storm. And then when the battery was changed, it was the hand of God coming into the screen. And I changed the battery, and everybody came back outside. And then the little bunny came, the little Energizer bunny came across the street. So it was kind of silly. But at the same time, I will ask myself, how come, what does this mean? And it was obviously a complete understanding of how the sun is the creator of life here on Earth. The sun gives its energy for the plants to grow. The plants release CO2. Release oxygen for us to breathe. We release CO2 for the plants. So it's a whole cycle connected. And then I asked myself, but okay, so if the sun is the provider of light, of life, who's behind the sun? Who's behind the many suns in our galaxy? So I started questioning my atheist beliefs at that point. When I came back home, I went on Google, researched a little bit. It was 1999. There was not that much information online back then. So I went to the LA Public Library, and I spent a whole week going every day. And that's where I learned from Gordon Wasson for the first time. I read his books. And I say to myself, if this guy, decided to go to such a remote area in Mexico back in the 50s, and I'm Mexican, and now it's the 90s, now we have roads, now it's like it's not as hard to get down there anymore. So I say, I want to do what this guy did. So I went down there, and in the search of a traditional healer, a curandera. And that's how I met Natalia. And it was also that's another story, another journey on how to get there. And then, asking people around to take me here, take me there, until I met her. At first she saw me and she said, no, I cannot do it for you because we already had dinner and it has to be done on an empty stomach. So if you want, we can do it tomorrow, but I had to go. So at the end, I ended up having the ritual with her, but she said, I won't be able to eat the mushrooms with you because I already had dinner. If it's okay with you, you can take them and I'll be your guide and I'll be with you until you fall asleep. And I said, okay, that's fine with me. I didn't even know that the healers will take mushrooms as well. So for me, it was fine. And then that's how I had my first experience with Natalia. And after that, it's pretty much been with her for the most part, all my experiences.
So you haven't had them on your own since then? Like, have you explored much in the solo journey? Has it, since discovering Natalia, been mostly within her ceremonial framework?
Yes, I've had a couple experiences on my own only.
Do you find a qualitative difference between your private experiences and and in the ceremonial differences? And an addendum or an adjunct to that question would be, what role has learning the mushroom in the ceremonial context played in your personal relationship to them when you've had these solo experiences?
Yes, for sure, there is a difference because when I am under the effects of the mushroom, there is certain things that I cannot see. I cannot see myself. I cannot watch my back while I'm on a journey. So having a healer with you, especially an experienced guide, can show you the path if you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing, because it's so easy to get distracted. It's so easy to start seeing the colors and the beauty of it, and then you forget what you're doing it for. I think the reason why you take mushrooms or why you have an experience like this is to solve something within yourself, either a problem, an illness, either physical or psychological, or even to give thanks, for life, to give thanks to God or to the higher spirit, however you want to call it. But I do think there is for sure a difference having a guide, somebody to tell you, to just keep you in track on your intention, because it's so easy. You might have one intention and then you have the experience on your own, and then on the whole thing, you forget and lose track, and then at the end, you don't obtain what you had originally planned, and it's just a waste of time, a waste of money, a waste of
Mushrooms.
mushrooms.
Yeah, great. So now, did you grow up in Mexico? You have a Mexican accent, so I would assume that you grew up at least in a very Spanish environment.
Yeah, I was born and raised in Monterrey, Mexico.
Okay.
And I moved to California about 20 years ago.
So when you were growing up in Mexico, was there a sense of the mushrooms being present there, in the sense that, like, did you know about them? Did they have a spiritual context there? Did they have a recreational context there? Like, what do you remember about mushrooms in the early part of your life?
None. There was no mention, no nothing about it. It's something that maybe if I was living in Mexico City, probably, but Monterrey, at least back then, I screened the movie recently there, and my feelings about the city changed a lot. But when I was growing up, it was very conservative, not very safe. I think alcohol is the main drug of choice of everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And no, there was no mention. I remember when I was 19, 18 years old, when I was in college, I went to Oaxaca for the first time. And that's where I learned about Maria Sabina. And there was some songs from a popular group related to Maria Sabina. But it's really hard to me, it was just like, weird stuff that the indigenous people will do.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't really even give it that much importance. I think a lot of the people growing up in Mexico, we are taught by society to think of indigenous people as less than
Mm-hmm.
ours. So there's that kind of sort of racism, unspoken racism towards indigenous cultures. So never really paid too much attention until later in life when I had my first experience and I understood what they were. Because if you have never had the experience, you can read, you can educate yourself, but it's going to be very difficult for somebody to explain you what it really is or what can be really accomplished in one of these sessions.
Mm-hmm. Because I mean, we could, again, like you said, you could read and familiarize yourself and study, but it's not the direct experience. But in referencing some studies and some reading, you can read about it catalyzing a mystical type experience. So like Griffith's work, and also way back, Walter Pankey and the Harvard Psilocybin Project. And you could read about there being a mystical experience, and you can even read the questionnaires and the language of people describing it. But a mystical experience is like, or potentially it is, cosmic, but it's like love. And you can't really describe to people what love is like. You can offer them all sorts of techniques and understandings and psychology and even physiology around the experience of love, but you don't truly understand until you're there. And it's in those moments that you can really learn where love applies in your life, broad spectrum, and it can be very healing. So the mystical experience catalyzed with mushrooms can also be very, very healing, and that is a core premise behind your documentary. Is there healing capacity spiritually, but also physically? There's discussion there about the connection between rebalancing physical health through a spiritual or psychological experience catalyzed with mushrooms. Can you go into what sort of what you personally perceive as the connection between the mushroom experience and also the physical healing in the body?
Yeah. I mean, that's a question that probably has not a way to prove it or to have a specific answer to say, like, okay, because our thoughts, I believe that our thoughts really create our physical state of being. And that includes illnesses. If we're thinking of ourselves as somebody weak, somebody sick, or you're not, it can affect, your physical body. In the indigenous words, this is something Natalia told me. every illness, every physical illness manifests first in the energy field, in the soul of the person. So they believe that people get sick when you lose your soul, when your soul is left somewhere through, because one example that they give a lot is that if you get scared for some reason, your soul might detach from your body and stay on that area. And while you are deprived from your soul, that's when illnesses can creep in and get sick. I think the mind, and there's been many articles, recent articles, where they talk about the mind being, responsible for our reality, including our physical well-being.
Mm-hmm. This loss of the soul, or soul loss, is something that is, I guess, like a key portion of the Michael Harner style cross-cultural shamanism, and it's also something that when you look into the developments, like you said, in mind-body connection, so the relationship between what's happening in the psyche and how disease and things manifest in the body, there is a connection there. I believe Gabor Mate, he is out of BC, Canada. He talks about how when something happens and it's very traumatic, there's a painful experience, and then if that painful experience isn't integrated properly, there's a trauma, which is a negative adaptive behavior that eventually that adaptation, which is to protect yourself from the trauma, which is the improperly integrated painful experience. Eventually you identify with this adaptation and you lose the sense of yourself that was there before the trauma. And so you actually lose a sense of who you are because it becomes superimposed by this adaptation, which is actually a contorted expression of yourself. And to me, I immediately, in my familiarity with cross-cultural shamanism, and hearing this in your words now, see this connection between the idea that something can happen, whatever it might be, and it's very traumatic, and then you lose this sense of yourself, or what you mentioned there as being sort of like a soul loss. I want to ask you about little saints, specifically, this term for people who aren't familiar. It's an English translation for how the mushrooms are often referred to in the tradition, in Spanish tradition.
Yes.
And what is the Spanish term?
It's Niños Santos, Santitos. There's different names that they use to describe the mushrooms, but basically they say they're like little children, and little children are saints because they have no sins. So they're the intermediaries to talk to God.
Mm-hmm. Now, the thing that I found really particularly interesting for me, again, I've done all the reading and study, like you had said. I've also had the experience, though not the direct Mexican ceremonial experience. But the thing that I found really interesting was the role that Catholic symbolism and Catholic belief structures played in this I don't know, like this wonderful capture you've made of this ceremony. It's like a vital time capsule. I feel like it's like you're there with these people and getting to experience this ceremony with them in such a real feeling, like real vulnerable way. And I was really surprised by that, but it makes sense. Can you talk about the role Catholicism has played in how the, say, traditional Mexican people, like the indigenous people, their original sort of cosmology, and the role Catholicism has played in the evolution of that cosmology?
Yes. Well, if we see it chronologically, before the conquest, before the Spanish conquest, these mushroom rituals were practiced for sure. Mm-hmm. But there is not any sort of document that tells us how these mushrooms were taken, under which conditions, or with what purpose. There's no information prior to the Spanish. Now, we have Fray Bernardino de Sahagún, which is a Spanish friar, and he's one of the few that documented the psilocybin mushroom rituals. And he will mention the indigenous people take these mushrooms and they get drunk. They get drunk on them and they start talking about their feelings, about their loved ones. They talk about war. They talk about peace. They talk about adultery. They talk about all these other things. But at the end, they say this is something evil. It's something that equals to the devil.
Mm-hmm.
They are being possessed by a negative entity. So they become prosecuted for it. Most of the indigenous people that practice these rituals, they do two things: either run to the remote areas to hide and be able to continue practicing these rituals, or they actually change their deities and replace them with the Catholic deities in order to pretend that they're praying to the Catholic deities, but in reality, they knew inside them that they were actually praying to their indigenous deities. But it was just an image replacement. Unfortunately, symbols are very powerful. So when you replace one symbol to another, it might work for that very first generation. But what about the second or third or fourth generation after that? They're just not going to know that that particular Catholic symbol has a connection to a more autochthonous one or a previous indigenous deity. Now, over time, nowadays especially, recently, the Catholic Church, at least in Huautla, started opening to these particular rituals, opening up, looking at them, trying to look at them eye to eye instead of superior to inferior, and attempting to learn from it and create that back and forth of knowledge from Catholicism to the indigenous beliefs through the mushroom or with the mushroom in the center, or the mushroom experience. And it's very interesting. I'm about to release an extended interview with the priest that I interviewed for the movie.
That was a good interview.
Yes, it's very short. I mean, it's a whole 1 hour long interview that I did with mostly of the scientists that are there or the doctors that are on the movie. It's an hour long interview with each one of them. So, but the movie is only an hour and a half. So we have a very limited room, and that's the nature of movies, that you have to condense everything. So a lot of very cool information, especially for people that we are very interested in the subject, was left out. And now I am going to start releasing it as an extended interview. So I have a 3-part interview that is 16 minutes long with the Catholic priest. And he explains it way better. I just posted online, but it still doesn't have the English subtitling. So I'm slowly, I'm a one-man company, and slowly I'm make that information available in English as well. On that interview, I realized that when I went into that interview with that Catholic priest, I thought they were going to be against it. I thought I was ready. I was ready for a fight. Once I got there, I realized that, on the contrary, they actually support it. They've had the experience themselves. And they actually, even this particular priest proposed the creation of what is called a true autochthonous Mazatec church that has to have that part, or the mushroom ritual, as an essential part of it. And he says it's not the Roman Catholic Church per se, but it's not separated from it either. It's just like one of the branches, and that's what he was proposing. As I say, that interview is going to be released pretty soon. I wrote a letter on change.org to the Pope a couple days ago. I just published it. And the Pope is going to be in Mexico, in the south of Mexico, in February 15. He's going to do a Holy Mass with indigenous communities down there. It's not in Oaxaca. It's not the same state. It's a different state. But in that other state, the same rituals are practiced as well in a Catholic form. So I am just basically explaining my situation. I traveled last year. We screened the movie all over the west coast of the United States, Vancouver, Canada. It's screened in Toronto. It's screened in the East Coast, in Providence and Baltimore, Mexico City, and different cities in Mexico. So one of the things that I realized, and people that I met, the many people that I met last year, uh, I think that there was several that came to me. I was also raised Catholic. I don't consider myself Catholic anymore, but through the mushroom rituals, I understood Jesus Christ. I understood his message. And I position him as an archetype, as an example to follow for me. Even though I don't consider myself Catholic, I do see Jesus or Virgin Mary or Lady of Guadalupe as, you know, eh, deities that set an example for us to follow, to be a good human being or to have goals and to, just behave in a loving way. Um, so that was very interesting for me because that's how I felt, even though I don't feel like, oh, I'm Catholic or I go to church every Sunday. I do see that, I mean, if we attempt to be close to someone like Jesus Christ or like Buddha or like Krishna or any of these great human beings that have come to earth. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. I think actually something very positive.
I agree.
Yeah, so I think it's time, especially if the priests down there are acknowledging and accepting that this really a positive way, and I think a way to connect with divinity. I think it's time for the new pope to make a comment on it too, as well. I think he's from Latin America. He's very open-minded. He's talked about abortion. He's talked about gay rights. He's talked about a lot of things that previous popes wouldn't touch. So hopefully he'll take a look at what we have here going on.
So I really appreciate this petition. Now, just to be clear, you're asking in this petition, because I haven't read it yet, that the Pope make comment on the use of mushrooms? Okay.
Yeah.
I immediately got the sense that the petition was to tell the Pope, like, if you should participate in one of these ceremonies, which I think would also be very, very interesting.
Well, he that will be his choice. One of the things, and this is something important, and I've been asked by many people, please take me to Mexico, please take me to Outlet, please to see your curandera. And for a little while, I'll say, okay, maybe I organize a tour or like bring a group down there again, but not for the purpose of filming, but for the purpose of them finding themselves and stuff like that. But then, within the indigenous beliefs, or one of the things they say that is very clear, do not offer this to people. Do not make an offer. Don't suggest to anyone to have the experience. It has to come from themselves. It has to be a personal decision, a personal choice in order for it to work, because it's so unique and strange, and it could, like, if somebody doesn't have a good experience or what is called a bad trip, and I was the person to tell them to go ahead and have that experience, then we're gonna have an issue, because like it didn't work for them. We never know how people are going to react. We don't know what they have inside. So that's why it's very important that it has to be a personal choice. It has to come from them. So the people that ask me that to take them to organize a tour, I tell them, you go down there and I'll make sure you land with the right people down there. But you have to take that step, buying your ticket, traveling down there, getting yourself up the hill, and then I can connect you with the right people there. But I'm not going to take you. I'm not going to take that effort to take you, because that's part of the healing too.
The pilgrimage. Yeah.
It's part of the journey. It's part of the whole thing. The decision of saying, I'm going. And the whole time, the whole 24 hours, 48 hours that it's going to take you to get to your destination, you're actually internalizing what you want to do, as opposed to, somebody putting it to you like very easy. It's like, oh, come with me, I'll take you.
Yeah, and then you're in a group of people, and they all have the same. They all have the same mentality that they kind of inherited from, say, the group leader or the person bringing them down, and then they all reinforce it with each other, and then you don't actually get your own original, like, deeply introspective perspective from a variety of input, you kind of get this closed sort of closed cultural framework system to define your intention. I think that it can be advantageous to be able to talk openly, but it can also be very limiting if it's just kind of handed to you on a silver platter.
Yes.
Yeah. So there's a couple there's a comment here I want to make that I think is interesting, and then I have a question. And the comment is about the evolution of the Mexican indigenous cosmology and the work with mushrooms. And I guess there's a lot coming up. One is Henry Mung, I believe, and him writing several years ago about the mushroom of language and utilizing the mushroom in Mexico. They utilize it to talk about things and talk out their feelings and stuff. But I think about this evolutionary trajectory and the incorporation of Catholic symbolism, and I look to the Santo Daime as well. And that was a very different evolutionary progression there, because the Daime was different. It was a man who had found Christianity in himself, went to the jungle, and then discovered the role Christianity played in his ayahuasca experience. Where this is different, it was actually kind of forcefully implanted on the people there out of a fear of persecution, right, from a very ignorant totalitarian overlord of culture, which was the Roman Catholic Church at the time. And so I find it very interesting. Now, the other thing is that one of the guys that's going to be on the podcast not too long from now, his name is Chris Bennett, and he talked about how a lot of the Christian rituals were inherited from the cults of Mithra, like very, very, very long ago, and that he proposes that the cannabosum, the thing that was contained in the sacred anointing oil and the stuff that they burned in the great incense in the underground temples where they'd all breathe it in and communicate to God and stuff, was cannabis, and that there are various layers of initiation in the cults of Mithra, and that one of the initial layers was cannabis, and one of the later layers was mushrooms, and that the Holy Eucharist, this act of giving them, I don't know, what now is just the dry, whitewashed cracker, but at a time was the passing down of, cannabis or potentially psilocybin. So it's interesting to, in a way, kind of see these original practices in a spiral about way find their way back into a culture that had been kind of, like I said, whitewashed or kind of made to be dry and disconnecting. Because a lot of, I perceive Catholicism now is more an act of saying the words, not having the experience, which I think is one of the things that the biggest limitations to religion in the modern world is that it doesn't come with this real deep spiritual experience. So that's just something that's interesting, this role of the mushrooms in Catholicism and stuff. Now, my next question is about the people that you interviewed. Now, I wasn't familiar with the priest that you interviewed, though he was a very, very awesome guy to listen to. There were 3 other people that I found great that you had selected to interview, which was Charles Grob, Jeremy Narby, and Stanislav Grof. And I want to ask you why you chose these 3 guys, and what is about each of them in particular about their perspective or their role in the larger cultural movements around psilocybin and psychedelics that made you want to feature them in the documentary.
Yes. Well, back in 2006 is when the very first articles about the psilocybin experiments and research that was starting to happen. It came up, this article, on the Miami Herald, I remember. And it was from Johns Hopkins University. And Charles Grob, he's from Baltimore, but he's at the UCLA in Los Angeles. I was in Los Angeles as well. So when I read that article, I was very surprised, because for the longest time I thought myself as being alone in these psychedelic beliefs. And I knew other people that will try mushrooms or entheogens, but they will do it in a way for party, for recreation. I didn't know anybody that will take it serious and say, okay, I can accomplish things with this experience. I can use it for my benefit. Mm-hmm. I didn't know that many people that will see them that way. And when that article came up, I was very relieved, and I was very happy to see that there was actually some research going on. The name Charles Grob came up there for the first time, and I was like, okay, it's right here on the Harbor Center, only like 40 minutes away from my house. I'll pick up the phone, give him a call, and we scheduled the interview. That's how he came up with Charles Grob. With Stanislav Grof and Jeremy Narby, Grof came to my radar through one of the persons that came with me to Mexico, Lori. She's also a holotropic breathwork therapist. So that's why, which is what Dr. Grof teaches. And that's how it came up to me. She gave me a book from Grof. I read it. And then later on...
Which book? Sorry for interrupting you.
Oh, I don't remember. I don't have the name.
Like okay, that's fine.
It's, but I have it in my room. What happened? The conference came. I was online researching, and then the conference in Basel, the World Psychedelic Forum in Basel, Switzerland, popped up into my searches. So I decided to go. And once there, I mean, there was all sorts of people talking about the use of entheogens. More people than I expected. There was almost like 3,000 people in this forum. It was great. It was great being down there, and that's where I got to interview both Jeremy Narby and Dr. Grof. Dr. Grof, obviously, he started with LSD psychotherapy back in the 60s. I decided to interview him because, well, there was a connection with somebody in my team. And at the same time, it felt to me that he was old enough, with enough experience to communicate something of interest or something valuable to younger people like me, or even younger people than me. And Jeremy Narby is one of the few anthropologists that study shamanism and psychedelic plants. So it was also perfect. And his book, The Cosmic Serpent, is just a great book. And that's why I decided to interview him as well. And he was there in Basel. I think he lives in Switzerland. So it was that's how it came up to be with them. And I think it complements very well. And one important thing, I interviewed them after I was done with the individual stories of each character, so that way I could integrate that part with my questions with them,
making the interviews with them directly relevant to the main story arc of your documentary, which is the journey of these six people. Now, I feel like I'm mildly familiar with Narby's work. I feel rather familiar with Stanislav Grof's work, and I felt really excited when I saw you feature him in the documentary, because I really perceive his work to be just so pivotal in psychology, like transpersonal psychology, but in the psychedelic movement. And he's not as often talked about as I think he deserves to be, because he really is, along a couple other key players, some of the longest running and most influential people in the whole scene, in the whole progression of psychedelic philosophy in the modern world. And so I really appreciate that you had him there. I'm very excited that you said that you have these 3 interviews coming out, plus the priest in a longer format at some point soon.
Yes, at some point. Those I'm going to release them. Grof, I talked to each one of them for like an hour. So there's a lot of information. I'm trying to condense it in like shorter interviews, like 15 to 20 minutes long.
And then parts. I'm very excited. I'm very excited to see that. Now, what has been the general tone that you've gotten from audiences after they've seen the documentary? And in particular, have you noticed a difference in the way it was received in location, as well as the age demographic of the people that attended?
Yes. Well, the people that have come to see the movie, there's about 5,000 people that came to the screenings total. We had like about 30 screenings. And it changes from one city to another. People react different. One thing is that the advertisement was done to people that are already familiar with the subject, like you and I.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of the people that came to the screenings is people that have had experiences with entheogens themselves. I will ask at the beginning, who in here has had an experience with mushrooms or ayahuasca or anything? And it was very common to have like 90% or more of the people raising their hands. A few screenings there was only like 10%. So the whole questions and answers at the end will be different. But for the most part, I guess it was pretty accepted. People find it interesting. I think the age demographic, at least as far as the age demographic, your question, in the United States, I felt that people that are younger, let's say 18 to 22 or 23, like college age kids, they might not be that interested. I think some of the kids that came were expecting to see something crazy or somebody tripping or like it's going nuts. Mm-hmm. And it's anything but that, it's very sacred, it's very spiritual, it's very controlled. It's a controlled setting. And some people might get also put off because of the Catholicism mm-hmm. in it.
Which, if sorry for interruption, which is something I wanted to make a quick comment on, is that throughout the course of it, you have this unfair advantage as the English listener, right? And that unfair watcher, and the unfair advantage is that you have subtitles for what Natalia, that's her name, correct, is saying. Yes. And so I couldn't help at first be like, wow, it's really weird, like how much the prayers are, to Jesus and Mother Mary and the whole environment, the setting. But then I thought about it for a second. I'm like, wait a minute. As far as the majority of the people who are English speakers are at this ceremony, she's not even speaking Spanish, is she? She's speaking like a very, very local dialect language. And so as far as I know, it's just the exact same when you listen to an ayahuasquero singing Icaro. It's this magical, different language. You don't know what they're saying, and it's all about the intention that counts. And that slight aversion to Catholicism, left over from my own past of part of my spiritual growth, was to push out of the original frameworks I was given for Christianity, kind of played in there. And then also this really interesting insight came about how much it's really no different if they're singing to Jesus and Mother Mary, or if they're singing to the ayahuasca, the mother goddess ayahuasca, or whoever it is that they're singing to. So I think that was actually a really positive aspect of the documentary for me to contemplate. So, but sorry to have interrupted you. Please continue.
Well, now in real life, if you're like, if you are there having that experience, you wouldn't get the subtitles. You will
exactly right.
Natalia praying, not understanding a thing. And also, the fact that there is translation going on. There is translation going on from Mazatec to Spanish to English and back, with the communication. So the movie makes it very fluid in a way that somebody can ask a question in English and that question is answered in Mazatec, or the other way around.
Right.
Yeah. So I mean, it's.
So I feel like I derailed you a little bit there. But I do have another question about the demographics, which is, Oliver, what do you personally feel as though this documentary is seeking to achieve, and B, what you have seen it achieve in regards to the personal feedback you've gotten from people in doing these screenings? And then these are two questions. And the third question is, what was the most meaningful individual feedback that you got in your journey of doing the screenings and being featured and doing the Q&A and stuff?
Well, I think the goal, I mean, I say that on the movie, is to let people know that this exists. Mm-hmm. Because a lot of people don't even know that this exists. They don't, they're not aware that you can use mushrooms for healing, spirituality, or they just see it as drugs, illegal drugs, too. That's the case. So the main goal is to bring this knowledge. Hey, this exists. Check it out. Yeah. It might not be for you, but check it out, And that is important, because if somebody is in need of healing, they might go through the traditional route, not knowing that probably, or maybe, this is a better way to find a solution to their situation.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the main goal, you know. I think people, like I said, most of the people that have come already know about how they're used, or why are they used, or they have little or different degrees of knowledge, everybody. But I've had people come that that has happened like quite often, actually. Either I get a message, or somebody approaches me at the end of the screening and says, "Hey, I've never heard in my life about these things. Now I want to do it." You
Mm-hmm.
know, or another person in Los Angeles, she said, "Well, I would have never considered, like, I've never done any drugs," she said. "Never smoked marijuana, never, I don't drink, I don't smoke tobacco, nothing." But she said, "And I will never consider eating mushrooms either. But after seeing your movie, if in the future I'm in a situation where I don't know how to handle it, I don't know what to do with myself, if I have an emotional crisis, I will consider having this experience." So that's a very positive thing, I think, because that's, to me, the movie achieved what it needed to achieve. It changed someone's mind. It changed someone's point of view towards a substance. And it might not be like some other people that have told me, "Hey, I've taken mushrooms before, but I will never ever do it that way, because
Mm-hmm.
I cannot stand Catholicism, or I'm afraid to having to go search for my demons." So yeah. And then, as far as comments, I mean, I'm getting all kinds of comments. I remember people just congratulating me for bringing it up, for putting my time onto it. I think there is, in the filmmaking process, there is so many walls that you hit as a filmmaker when you're working on your project. I mean, you're a book writer, it's also similar.
Mm-hmm.
How you're working on a project, it takes time, it takes effort, and that equals to also money that
Oh
needs to be
yeah.
spent, or not made, because you're working on a project and not being paid for it.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I mean, but at the end, for me, in my personal life, this proof of great way for me to deal with the loss of my father first. And after my father passed, I started drinking a lot, so that became an issue in my life. And through these experiences, I was able to release that pain, and I didn't drink anymore after that. I rarely drink nowadays. So it took that pain away from me. And I think that can be done for many other people as well, if they're open to it. Like I say before, if it comes from them, truly from them, and they want that experience, the mushroom will provide. It always provides, and it always gives you what you want, and shows you what you need to see in order to have a better understanding of reality and your life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I completely agree, and yeah, I want to echo those congratulations that you received in the tour, with a personal gratitude and acknowledgement to you for what you've done. Because I mean, we're both on a similar page of trying to elucidate the healing potentials of mushrooms to a culture, a society who is mostly ignorant to it, and if not ignorant, then unfortunately sort of conditioned towards the negative, which I think is even worse than ignorance. And so I just really want to thank you for what you've done, because I do
Yes.
feel this documentary was a very beautiful watch, very, like I said multiple times, a very vulnerable expose of several people who go in for this experience, and very much an opportunity to peek into a world that I've always found interested in, but never. I don't think I really ever actually thought about what it would be like, and if I did think about what it would be like to be in what is now contemporary tradition of mushrooms being used in the Oaxaca region, which is the original region that it was discovered by Wasson, right? Um, and I was definitely quite surprised by what I saw, and really intrigued, very interested. So I
Yes,
appreciate the
yes. I
documentary.
wanna comment something else, because in the screening in Seattle, there was this woman. I think from her looks, that she was from indigenous background, indigenous descent, from Mexico,
Mm-hmm.
and she was angry. She was angry that I made the movie.
Mm.
Yeah, and there was a little heated exchange of words there on the screening afterwards. She was angry because people were laughing while the movie was playing.
Yeah.
Uh, there was a few times, there's a few scenes that even when I was editing the movie, that I was talking to my assistant, we were going over the footage, and we will find things that were kind of funny. They were like silly. They were like just the whole context of the whole thing was funny, but it was not funny because we were making fun or laughing at it. It was funny because we were actually being reminded of ourselves, of our own
Mm-hmm.
experiences, and we see ourselves in that situation of, like, I don't know, being caught doing something bad, or there's a few scenes that happen in during the ceremonies that are, it can make people bring a laugh, or happiness, or remembering something to the people that are watching, and people laugh sometimes. But she took the laughter of people as if they were laughing at it. She took offense. She
Mm-hmm.
got offended because people were laughing, and that happened a few times. It happened a couple times, and I was asked, "How do you deal with people that laugh?" And then I said, "Well, I don't have to deal with them, because what if they're laughing is a reflection of who they are. It's reflecting
Yeah.
what they
Yeah.
know. So why am I gonna be concerned or worried because the opinions of others? It will be a waste of my time." And the other thing that this woman said is that she actually compared me to Gordon Wasson on how he went and filmed them, and she referred to Wasson as somebody that took advantage of the indigenous people.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I don't know. I mean, I also went there and I also filmed like Gordon Wasson did, but I don't feel like I'm taking advantage of anybody. I mean, I only have a relationship with one shaman, with one healer, not with the whole community at large. If I mean, it is true that that healer represents something at a larger scale that is going on nearby, but at the same time, it's like nobody's being taken advantage of here. I mean, my intention is also her intention. She also wants people to know about the mushrooms, and another thing that this person mentioned is that the person sitting next to her, she was saying, "Oh, that's weird. Oh, that's weird. Oh, that's weird." Commenting on the movie. And she also took offense on that. And I'm like, well, why are you taking offense on that? I mean, when I went there, I'm Mexican. And when I went there for the first time, I thought a lot of the things were weird,
Mm-hmm.
But why are they weird? Because I've never seen them. It has nothing to do with the movie. It just, like I said, it's showing a reflection of who you are at that particular time. So there is no need to take offense, And for everybody that thinks that, some people think that this shouldn't be mentioned, that it should be kept secret, which is not a secret anymore. I mean, it's been talked enough, I think, but not enough for everybody to know. So I think times have changed. We are in a global world. The information goes back and forth really fast. Knowledge goes back and forth really fast. So why would we want to keep something secret? It's better if we explain how it is, show it. And some people say, well, it's gonna get full of tourists. It's gonna be a bunch of people are gonna go to Huautla because of your movie. Well, not necessarily, because mushrooms grow everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
They grow absolutely everywhere in the world. There is no need to go all the way down there to have a mushroom experience. There is no need. you know. And with a movie like Little Saints, you can see how these rituals are performed, and you can see if it's something for you or not, you know. Right off the bat, many people have said it's like they look at it as like, oh no, I would never ever have a mushroom experience in that situation. I'd rather do it outdoors, or like this and that, or these other ways that people do it. So yeah, you know, I think once you see the movie and you see that it's something serious, and if you think it's something for you that you would like to experience, well, everybody's welcome to go down there, you know. And like Natalia says in the movie, she asks to God on the prayer, it's like, please continue sending me your children, you know. So
I think you made some really good comments there, and you actually addressed my last question for you, which was, you know, having seen what you perceive to be the benefit, you know, what might be the negative result of this film. And I'm still going to ask you that question, but a little bit more specific. But first, I want to comment that the laughing thing. There was several things that happened, or a few things that happened, where I was like, huh. You know, the laughing and the weird, like that's weird and kind of funny, but the funniness is not like, I'm laughing at them, but more or less like remembering that sometimes the mushrooms, like the little children, it's very serious and it's very profound, but sometimes it also is kind of silly. And that's also part of why they're so beautiful, is their ability to put you in this place of having deeply profound implications of something that on the surface is also kind of silly, right? And I found a lot of value in that. And the idea of weird, I mean, when you see something as weird, it's strange, and it's strange in a way that doesn't fit with your normal modes of operation, right? Your normal mode of perception. So it's weird because it's strange and it doesn't fit with what you already know. And there's lots of times where you can go to a museum and be like, wow, that's weird, you know, or go out on the street and notice somebody's behavior and be like, wow, that's weird. And it doesn't necessarily come from a judgmental place, but I could see how a person who holds what they're seeing or that experience in a vulnerable place can feel slightly injured by people reacting to it from a place that doesn't come from what they perceive as being vulnerable reverence. And I also think that the exposure is important, and the way that you expose this practice in Little Saints comes from a place that I think is important to be the first exposure, which is from a place of this is what it is, and this is what it is from the eye-to-eye perspective that you mentioned earlier. It's like this is exactly what it is, and it's from a place of wholly and completely respecting and honoring what this represents to the people featured here that I'm showing you, right? And that being the seed that you plant in people, rather than it coming up through somebody else's ignorant political comment or somebody else's more biased, hierarchical view of evolution. You know, like first we were animals and then we were savages and now we're science rationals, or you know, whatever that broken model is. So I appreciate that your documentary presents it in this way. I do also think that there is something to be considered about her point there about benefit. There's a document, or a lecture from Breaking Convention that I don't remember the name of the lecture. I think it was ayahuasca tourism or something. And it's a fantastic look at how the West does benefit more in exploring and researching indigenous cultures than the indigenous cultures do, for the most part. Like some places and some people are able to take the documentary filming and stuff and like spin it into not-for-profit stuff, but that there is this disbalance, right? In the sense that you're, you know, earning recognition and you are building a career on presenting these things, and the people who you feature, I don't know what the role there is, but they might get something, but for the most part, they just get featured, right? And that there's not anything necessarily wrong with that because you do it in such a revering, honored, respectful way, but just recognizing that there is a level of disbalance between the Western world and the non-Western world that should be acknowledged so that it can be properly, it can just be navigated properly, you know, so that you understand that's the case, but it's going to be the case no matter what. So you do your absolute best to maintain the respect and the reverence and the honoring of the people that you're working with, and, you know, somewhat disbalance the gaining from. Does that connect with you? Does that feel like it fits?
Yeah, 100%. I think. I think the like I say, the experiences are unique to everybody. It depends on your own set of experiences and intellectual knowledge. And yeah, I mean, I don't know if you have any specific question, but I do agree 100% with what
Okay,
you
great.
said.
Yeah, I just wanted to check in. I can send you this lecture as well. I think you'd really enjoy it. The final question is really about picking your brain for a second. If you were to look at what you've done with this documentary, and I see your good intentions, and I've seen the positive result, I've had good feelings with the documentary. What do you see as being a potential negative consequence for having featured this experience? What you show, like this little snapshot of the culture of these people's very personal lives. Do you see what could be some negative benefit or negative results of featuring this?
Well, the most commented one is that the tourism, that a bunch of people are gonna go down to Woutland and start desecrating or like misusing the mushroom. That's the main comment that I get, or the main concern, I guess. But I doubt nowadays that will happen. Maybe back in the 50s and the 60s it happened because nobody knew about mushrooms. Everybody saw mushrooms as poisonous, all of them. Mm-hmm. There was no way to really, for people to know how to identify them. But nowadays, they're everywhere. People know. So there is no, I'm not that concerned about the tourism part. Like I said, I didn't disconnect it from the tradition on the movie. Mm-hmm. So I don't think people will just do them just because. I don't know. I mean, I don't foresee any negative aspect from it other than, I don't know. I don't see any. Do you see any negative that I'm not seeing?
Like not necessarily. I think they were all kind of brought up when you spoke about this one woman's concerns, and then when you just spoke about the tourism stuff. And it seems like you have really thought it out. It wasn't so much a fishing question to try to expose something that I perceived, because I did perceive it quite positively, but just to really investigate, ask the question. It's like nothing is all good, right? And so there is possibility for negative consequence, and whether or not you considered that and assessed the situation. It seems like you have. So that was basically the question, because I just think it's important to ask both sides and look at both sides of things.
Yeah. No, I don't think I think, I mean, as far as I don't know, the legality of it, it's legal in Mexico to do it. I mean, there's no, from every angle that you look at it, I don't see. The only thing that I was concerned is the potential for abuse. That's that people will abuse it. Mm-hmm. But I don't think so. I think on the contrary, I think it puts some people off.
Yeah. Well, it's very different than what I kind of imagined. I think I had accidentally assumed that the Mexican traditions would be similar to the ayahuasca traditions, and each one of those is just like so radically different from the next anyways. Mm-hmm. But so it was really positive watch for me. Now, closing up, again, thank you for the documentary. Where can people learn more about Little Saints? Where can they watch it? Where can they buy it? Where can they get the cool t-shirt you're wearing?
LittleSaintsMovie.com is our website. You can find all the information there. The movie is available on iTunes, on Amazon, on digital and DVD. And also from our website, you can rent it or buy it there. Great. For streaming.
Well, for the listeners, I'll make sure that those links are in the show notes that are going to be on the website, jameswjesso.com, the website that you're probably streaming this from. And I'll also feature the trailer to your documentary just underneath the video for this podcast. Is there anything else you'd like to leave the listeners with before we kind of do final salutations?
Just to be open-minded, to inform yourself, to read. I think entheogens have a great potential for the near future, for humanity, for us to be better human beings. Again, don't do it because somebody's pushing you to do it. That will be probably the worst mistake anybody can make. It has to be an internal, personal decision, and that's it. If anybody has the feeling or the wanting to have the experience, by all means, have it. Be safe. Have somebody with you that has had previous experiences that can guide you. It doesn't have to be a traditional healer. It can be, somebody that has experience on how to handle people that are under the effects of having a journey. Yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you very much, Oliver. Oliver Quntanilla, for being on the show. There's the way that I said that is reference to before the recording started, when I was really trying super hard to pronounce your last name right. But thank you very much for being on ATTMind Radio, and I wish you all the luck in making sure that this documentary reaches all the eyes and hearts that it should, because it was very good.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
For the listeners, thank you again for listening or even watching on YouTube ATTMind Radio. If you liked it, hit the like, hit the 5-star, hit the, comment. Yeah, super cool. Please do that. It helps the algorithms, help other people to find us. And please take an opportunity to check out Little Saints, stream it on Amazon or YouTube, or not YouTube, sorry, iTunes. Yeah, or wherever you can, to give it a watch. Invite some friends to watch it with you. It is a really cool thing, and it's a great discussion generator. So enjoy it, and thanks. Take care.